Wonderful. Hello, everyone. My name is Jared Shablon, and I am the chair of Shore Progress. I want to thank you all so much for joining us, both here on Zoom, on our Facebook, and on YouTube. Tonight, we have a very important community conversation about a lot of topics currently happening nationally affecting our Latino and other immigrant communities here on the Eastern Shore. But before we dive into that, I wanted to share a little bit about who we are as an organization. So we are, uh,
Oh, you have 1 second, Jared.
so yeah, we are Short Progress as she works on getting that up. We are a grassroots progressive organization that covers all 9 counties here on the beautiful Eastern Shore of Maryland. We are dedicated to building power for working people through civil engagement, community outreach, policy advocacy, and electoral work. Getting good candidates elected. We serve as the political home for progressives across the Eastern Shore, connecting individuals and supporting bold solutions to the serious challenges that we face. So before we kind of dive into our wonderful guest, I do want to talk a little bit about what happened last legislative session and give some important information. So the first day of the upcoming legislative session in Annapolis will convene on January 14th, and the session lasts for about 90 days. By February 9th, all Senate bills introduced this date have to be referred to the Rules Committee. And by the 13th, all bills have to be introduced. February 13th have to be introduced in the House. By March 30th, each chamber has to send the other chamber their bills in order for them to pass. That's called Passover, crossover day, not Passover. I always get those two confused. Completely different. And then on the 13th of April, we adjourn after the 90-day session for the end of the 2026 legislative session. During the legislative session, a lot happens. Like, for example, in the 2025 legislative session, 3,281 bills were introduced, 848 were enacted. Our organization here at Shore Progress supported 62 pieces of identified pieces of legislation. Out of the 62 we supported, 57 pieces passed and were signed into law. As you can see here, here's a little bit of kind of where we broke down. We focused a lot on energy, healthcare, elections, education. If you can name of an issue, we worked on it. But the real reason you're here tonight, and it's my privilege to introduce the Maryland Legislative Latino Caucus. It was created in 2024 by just a handful of Latino members of the General Assembly. From its initiation, the MLLC has been dedicated to advocating for equality and adequate representation for Latinos and immigrant populations in the General Assembly. Today, the MLLC has a membership of more than 50. That's more than 50 state senators and delegates working together to be the voice for Latinos in the Maryland General Assembly. It's my pleasure to introduce the executive director of the Maryland Legislative Latino Caucus, Jason Avila.
Perfect. Appreciate it, Jared. Thank you so much. And I do want to give a very heartfelt thank you to everybody that's here today, to Shore Progress for their amazing work, to our Know Your Rights experts that's here today. Again, thank you all for being here and being a part of this conversation. Again, just trying to make sure that we have a valuable discussion between the caucus and our colleagues and allies on the Eastern Shore, just to make sure, we're in an understanding and, really creating those valuable messages. This community session serves, to be able to create that space and is a part of a couple of different community sessions we've been doing across the state during the interim in preparation for the 2026 legislative session. So very excited for all the questions, very excited to hear more from everybody. As Jared mentioned, the Latino Caucus, we serve as a leading advocate for our Latino and immigrant communities of the state in the General Assembly, averaging about 80 to 90 pieces of legislation that we review every single session for these communities and to empower them. So yeah, again, thank you all for your participation, for your attendance, and very excited for the presence here. Now, I do want to make sure if it's okay with me to introduce them, or Jared, if you want to take over that part.
That is all for you. Appreciate it,
Perfect.
Jason.
Of course. Um, Following up on that, I do want to introduce our incredible Know Your Rights experts that's going to be giving us a valuable training here today. Viviana Westbrook. She is an amazing lawyer with clinic, and again, a very, very strong advocate of the community. So I'll pass it on to her. And again, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. And it is my pleasure to be here today with you all. Let me first grab my presentation. So just bear with me. Okay. And let me start this slideshow. All right. Y'all see that? We're all good? Okay. So this is me, and this has my contact information. So if at any point you want to send me an email, you have any questions, please follow up. I'm the state and local advocacy attorney at Catholic Legal Immigration Network, and I basically do a lot of advocacy work across 48 states and DC, on trying to protect immigrant rights. Prior to that, I worked for many years in different nonprofits, doing work primarily with survivors of gender-based violence. But I did have the opportunity to also work with kids in detention and kids in general through KIND, former Care Coalition, and Catholic Charities of Baltimore. Okay, so there are going to be some things that I say a few times during this training, and one of them is disclaimer that, this is giving general education. This is not meant to be legal advice. Every person, every organization, every church, consulate, whoever it is, has to make their own determination, based on the circumstances that they are presented with. And you should always seek legal advice about those circumstances. And since the beginning of the year, this information has changed quite often. I have revamped this training too many times. I don't even know how many times, what version this is. But just make sure to always, use trusted sources to stay informed, to make sure that you know that it's coming from a place that's verified. And also, don't forget to just, while you hear a lot of things about what's happening at the federal, state, local, your county, like they might all be doing different things as well. There might be opportunities for people to get involved on these levels as well. So don't pass those up. And no matter what you're doing, just remember safety first. Because just because you might know the law or might know what your rights are, it doesn't mean that immigration enforcement is actually going to follow it. Unfortunately, I'm sure you've all seen a lot of what's going on in the news, and it's really crazy out there. We're almost at the end of the first year, and it's not getting any better. So remember that rights, always exert your rights. If you can exert them for others, tell others what their rights are, please do. You have this wonderful power to educate people. So that is really important. But make sure that you are preserving your safety as well as the immigrant safety as well. That always has to be number one. All right, so let's talk a little bit about enforcement in our communities. We've seen a little bit about what's happening, across the country. We are right next to DC. So of course, we know about the National Guard going in. We know, we've seen plenty in our own communities. Unfortunately, the protected areas policy got rescinded at the start of the year. So that protected certain locations from ICE enforcement. And those locations include areas like hospitals, churches, schools, domestic violence shelters, shelters in the case of any kind of emergency management, like weather related, like storms or, those kinds of things, like really important things to not have immigration enforcement, happening there. But that was done away with. So, what we've seen is that ICE is showing up in a lot of different spaces. And one of the scary things, that we hear, that we've seen, is that they're masking, right? They are masking because they are worried they're going to get doxxed. They don't want that to happen. Um, and it makes it very unsafe for our communities because then we do not know who is approaching us, and that is something that has been very difficult to have to deal with because they should be identifying themselves, but masking, all of a sudden somebody comes up to you and tries to grab you, tries to grab someone off the street. Like, is this a kidnapping? Is this a valid, taking, like, it's very difficult to know that. So, one of the things that we are seeing are bills that make it, mandatory for, any officer to, have to identify themselves and to not wear masks, except in very specific circumstances. And states are passing laws that include not just their own state and local police, but also federal. Obviously, we all know that this is going to be challenged. Well, it has been challenged in California, and we'll see what happens, but it is definitely something to keep in mind and to think about. And, if you see someone, if you have the opportunity to ask, the officer who they are, what agency they are, you have that right. You should always exert that right. Always ask them, what is your name? Let me see your ID, please. And what agency are you with? Um, okay, so this is a little bit about Maryland counties and localities. There's, this really focuses a lot on 287G, which I'll talk about in a second. But, something that's fascinating about Maryland is that on the plus side, we have many localities that actually permit non-citizens to vote. So non-citizens are prohibited from voting at the federal level. And in the same law that prohibited them from that, it also allows states and localities to make that determination, like if non-citizens can vote at that level, as long as they put it like in their state constitution or their, local ordinance. So we have the most cities, in any state that allows non-citizen voting, which is really, really exciting, and I think empowers people and really just gets folks to contribute to their civic duty, and it's exciting to see. Okay, so what's happening? 287G. It basically allows, it's an agreement between local law enforcement and ICE, and they enter into these partnerships, and basically our local law enforcement then gets deputized to act as ICE agents in certain capacities. And so we have three models. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth. The scariest one is basically the one that allows officers to, act as ICE in their day-to-day, but that is currently prohibited by Maryland law, or at least we are interpreting it as such, and that is how it has been interpreted. So that is good. And I know that we are going to try to get rid of this next year, 287G altogether. So hopefully that happens. It's very, very dangerous. As someone who worked with survivors for many years, I can tell you that it makes survivors, it makes victims of crime see the police as an extension of ICE. And then they don't want to go and report crimes. And that doesn't keep any of us safe. So, as of, I guess, yesterday, there are 1,199 287G agreements across all the states. And before this year, there were only 134. So you can see how this has just blown up this year. This has become a huge issue. And Maryland, I think before this year, we had like 3 287G agreement counties, and now we have 8. But I know many of you on here, many people on the Eastern Shore really pushed back to make sure that Wicomico didn't become one of those. And I just say kudos to all of you. I know this is amazing. It just shows the power of what happens when you go out, when you speak to your representatives, when you express your opinion, when you show up and you show up strong. So I think that is wonderful. Okay, so the rights. Going to be very brief on these. So here we've seen that there has been a positive effect on people knowing your rights, right? Like the administration has definitely been very vocal about not being pleased that so many people have known their rights, that I think that they had to stop going as much to like door to door to houses because they weren't being let in, right? And they were, people were really effectively using that knowledge. Um, but, so it's really important, I will say, to have, to know the rights, to know your rights, know the rights of immigrants, and everyone has these rights. It doesn't matter what your immigration status is, you all have these rights. And I think that's something that's really important. We sometimes forget, sometimes we don't know. Um, but yeah, it's really important. There are red cards that you can order from the ILRC. It's the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. They come in a bunch of different languages, and they have most of the main rights there, and they have them in a bunch of different languages. You can also download them for free and print them on your own. And Clinic, we have our own version, like in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. So I just put our sample there. So when you're at home, there are two ways that ICE can enter your house. And with a valid warrant, it has to be a valid judicial warrant or with your permission, right? So think of them as like vampires and be very careful that you do not give them this permission, right? So if they are like, "Oh, can I come in?" No. The answer is no. You may not. Do you have a valid judicial warrant? And you do not want to open the door in any circumstance because they take that as an invitation. They will see that even if it's a little crack, even if it's just to, you want to see something, you want to verify something. No, don't do it. They're like, "Oh, yep, they opened the door a crack, and so clearly they invited us in." So don't do that. Always ask for identification. Like I said, always ask to see the judicial warrant. I have a lot of resources on judicial warrants and the difference between them and administrative warrants that, they show, and I can share these resources with folks to distribute afterwards. But what I will say is, just look at the signature, right? If you don't really see anything that says like Judge so and so, right? If it's ICE officer, then that is your big clue that is not a judicial warrant. If it's like ICE officer so and so signed this, like no, it has to be like judge, or justice of the peace, blah blah blah. But if you don't see those, then it's likely just a administrative warrant. And I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, it is not going to be a judicial warrant. They are not showing up with that. They are not going through the whole process to get a judge to rule that, there is probable cause to issue this. So it's really important just to keep that in mind and to be very, I don't want to say wary, but cautious. If you encounter one, if you're looking at one, make sure it has, signed by a judge and also that it's still valid because a lot of times, things can expire. They might have the wrong person on, even if it is a judicial warrant. So you just want to make sure that everything is correct. Really important, you have the right to remain silent. That is so important. Tell people, because a lot of times people start explaining, you are in the moment, you're having this really visceral reaction, to a very, very difficult situation, a very traumatic situation. And you don't know what's going to come out. You might just start spewing your whole life story. You might see an immigrant spew their whole life story and be like, "Oh, well, I came here illegally, and I crossed over with my family, but I've been here for so long," and blah, blah, blah. And they're saying things that are very compelling to us, but to the immigration officers, it's an admission of guilt. It's an admission of, having come here illegally. And so it's really important that people know they can and should remain silent. Now, it's also really important to know that it's not something you can't just like stay quiet and, think that they'll assume that's what it is. Like you have to verbally assert your right. Be like, "I am asserting my right to remain silent," and then assert it. And if you're with someone and something's happening and you have the opportunity and they start to speak, they've just said that they're going to assert the right to remain silent and they start to speak up because this happens a lot, just give them a little nudge, be like, you have the right to remain silent. Just remind them that's their right and they should exercise it. Um, if officers do get into your home, make sure you tell them if there's anyone that has any conditions, children, sick people, elderly, and always, no matter what happens, even if it is a valid judicial warrant, whenever something happens, just say you do not consent. You don't consent to the search. You do not consent to whatever they are doing, right? Because at the end of the day, you might end up discovering something that, later on, could invalidate what they did. But you have to at least have said that you did not consent to it, right? Because if they show that you did consent, then that kind of negates the need for the warrant, right? So always make sure paying attention where the warrant search, write down everything that happens, everything with the altercations, and throughout everything, one of the main roles that those of us who are allies can play is the role of a witness, right? We are there to see what is happening, to see, to record this, to be able to tell someone's story, to be like, this is what happened to them. This is the person, they got, taken, they got picked up, and be able to just share those stories. And especially, if you can get a name, that's really important, right? If you don't know the person and you see them, something's happening, always ask for a name, because sometimes these people get taken and then their loved ones don't know where they are, don't know how to track them down. And the system is not great. Like, it takes 72 hours at least for ICE to sometimes update their system to get people in there. And right now it's taking longer than that. And imagine just being someone, just if someone you loved was gone for like 72 hours and you didn't know where they were, like, that would be terrible. That would be one of the most vile things that could happen to you. So, if you can get a name, really important. Now, if you're in the street or public area, one of the things to keep in mind, don't run. Sometimes people just scatter and you don't want people to scatter. You just want to always ask, am I free to go? If you're with someone, are they free to go? And so a lot of times, like, ICE could be very cagey. They might be like, oh, well, I'm just talking. I'm asking you some questions. That's it. I just want to know a few things. Be like, okay, but are you detaining me? Like, am I, like, is this a stop? Like, am I being detained officially? And, if they say, they have to answer, hopefully they will. And, then if they don't answer, something that I tell folks is that then I'd be like, okay, well, since you are not answering my question, I am taking that as the fact that I'm free to go, because you should be telling me if I am detained. So I'm going to walk away. Thank you. And calmly, very slowly walk away from that interaction, right? Because they should be telling you that. In some states, you might have to give your name, to whoever is talking to you. But, and also you can, again, always say you do not consent to any searches that they do on the street. And here's some other things, like if agents have like a reasonable suspicion that someone entered the country illegally, then they can arrest them. But again, silence is really important so that they don't get that reasonable suspicion. ICE can arrest someone in public without a judicial warrant. It's really important, really scary. And also the ACLU and CASA have made clear you do not have to provide your name if you are in Maryland when asked by a police officer. So that is good news for those of us who live in the state. And different laws apply when you're in your car, so you have to provide license, registration, insurance. So no matter what, don't let anyone provide false. Like, if you hear someone say, oh, I think maybe I'll lie to them. No, that is the worst thing they could ever do. You immigrants, no one should ever be providing false information to, officers, no matter what. Again, you can exercise your right to remain silent, so there's no reason why you need to lie. Just don't answer anything. And again, you can always say, don't consent to the search. And of course, you can always ask for your attorney if you have an attorney, really important. I talked a little bit about the rescinding of the protected areas. Now, the Fourth Amendment rights still apply, and Fourth Amendment protects people from unreasonable searches and seizures. And this has been found, in different court cases to grant a reasonable expectation of privacy. That's what it's called. And it's not a black or white line, unfortunately. So I can't say this exactly is public, this is private, but a lot of it is going to depend on how we make these spaces either public or private, right? Like if you put up a screen or something, if you put up a door, if you lock that door, if you have a key and put personnel only, no, like no private access, whatever it is, right? No public access, like that very much is a private area, right? But it makes a big difference because ICE has to have a judicial warrant or consent to enter the non-public areas of the property. Now, of course, that means that they are allowed to be in public spaces, right? So, if you're in a restaurant, if you're in a waiting area of a hospital, for instance, like they can just walk around and ask people questions. Again, people don't have to answer the questions, but they can do that. So this is something about, if you're part of a church, if you're part, if you have a kid who's going to school, if you have you know, well, of course, Maryland is different because we now have that law and the Attorney General, um, gave guidance on this. But it's really important, right? Like if you are in the place that isn't under the AG's guidance, it's really important to have these policies, right? And the policies will talk about how people interact with ICE and CBP, and they also have to really clearly state what is a private area, what is a public area. Because the last thing you want, like what you don't want to do in the way you show up, is to have it be a reactive situation. Like you want to have already thought through these possible ramifications, possible what you are going to do in the moment, right? So if you say, well, if ICE comes here, then I will do X, Y, Z, and you need to make sure that you are talking to other people who work there, other people who live there, other people who, whatever, are going to be interacting in that space to ensure that everyone knows, and that you've had a conversation with everyone so that whatever actions you've decided on are agreed to by all. And also, again, talk to an attorney, make sure that what you're doing is lawful. And, if you're engaging in civil disobedience, then, be prepared and understand the full, consequences. And again, talk to an attorney. So you want to make sure you also avoid collecting immigration status because you just never know when it might get subpoenaed, when they might just come in and grab it, and you might end up giving a lot of information to ICE. So it's better if you don't need it, don't get it. If it's not required by law or something, like don't have it. These are great signs. So again, like if you have a church, an organization, whatever, like they have, a lot of places are putting these signs up that basically say you can't enter here without a judicial warrant. And then they might also have someone who might be like the point of contact. So if you do have a judicial warrant, ICE can reach out and be like, okay, well, I won't enter, but these are the people that I'm going to talk to because I have my warrant. I want to talk to someone. And there's some extra protections, and I'm going to kind of skip over those because I could take forever. But you can help immigrants, take action by helping them find an attorney or accredited rep. So there is a list, that the courts normally hand out that has a whole list of nonprofits, in the specific state, in the specific area where people can go to, people can talk to. Having worked at Catholic Charities of Baltimore, I know that Catholic Charities of Baltimore handles the entire state. They'll take cases from anywhere in the state, so that will include the Eastern Shore. And it's really important, that people gain access. And sometimes, money goes a long way, right? People need money to be able to travel from the Eastern Shore all the way to Baltimore, and it's not cheap because I've had clients who paid like taxi drivers, paid a friend or paid, the Uber, the whatever, the Lyft driver, whoever it was, but it wasn't cheap. And so I think if you can find an attorney, if you can, get a fund for people so that they can do that. If you can, sometimes Lyft and Uber might even donate some things for specific travel, but it's really important because a lot of times immigrants might not have as much of a support system as the rest of us do. And for example, someone might lose a family member because ICE picked them up or because 287G got activated. And then, all of a sudden they're without like their breadwinner or at least, half of their income, and that's a huge loss. So, anything you can do to help make it happen so that they can get screened for immigration relief. Because if they don't know if they qualify for something, then they might be missing out on some opportunities, right? And you also want to see if you can register them with their consulate, like a church, other community religious centers, because these are all useful things later on, especially if they do get an immigration case to just show, that they are a person of good moral character. But also, if they do end up getting detained, like the consulate is going to be someone that they will want to call. And if they already have that person's information, if they're already aware of their existence, it facilitates things a lot. So there's also family plan. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Make copies of all immigration, other important documents, child care plan. We've seen too many times where no one made a child care plan and then the parents, get detained and the schools end up just, taking care of kids, trying to figure out where this child should go. And sometimes because they have no other choice, then the Department of like Child Protective Services could get involved. And, that's not something that you want to have happen. Like you want to make sure that people are planning ahead of time so that, any guardians, any potential guardians that they have are already squared away. Okay, so these are kind of the rights, the basic rights, and right to speak to an attorney, right to remain silent, right to refuse a search, right to refuse to sign a document, right? So again, immigrants can say, I'm not going to sign this until I talk to someone, talk to an attorney. Make sure it's also in their language, right? Because a lot of times, ICE will just give you a document and be like, sign this or else I won't let you out, or your kid is going to get placed in Child Protective Services, and they make all these threats that are terrible. And, it's terrifying. And some people might just be like, well, what am I signing? Oh, well, with this, you're going to get released, and really what they're signing is an order of deportation. So, yeah, make sure people know that, make sure people actually read what they're signing, especially if you're there and are able to be like, do you understand what they're saying? You have this right. Talk to an attorney before you sign. And again, right to contact consulate, right to request to be released on bond. So, you want to make sure that these are really important, right? And right to be free against unreasonable search and seizures, right to attend a criminal hearing. So, if you're the person who committed the alleged crime, and you want to be present, right? Because sometimes if you're detained and you're, in immigration detention, that doesn't mean that they're going to automatically let you go to your criminal hearing. You have the right to, but a lot of times you have to assert that and let them know and be like, I want to come here, and I need to be before my criminal hearing so they don't just find you guilty because you didn't show up to your court date. Um, you want to hear some best practices, safety tips. And these are all like important information that you can also, especially if you're thinking about accompanying someone to like an ICE check-in, to immigration court, just anywhere else. You can have these things down. Um, make sure you have their A number, because the A number it's the alien number, is what it's called. And it's if they've had any contact with immigration, whether it's through an application for immigration relief or anything like or they were stopped at the border or anything like that, they will have an A number. So if they get detained, you will be able to locate them through the ICE locator online with that A number. But again, 72 hours afterwards. Um, And here's some of the things to ask, uh, enforcement, and here's some more ways to get involved. So I love these because Portland made it weird, right? And I was on a call and somebody said it said this because they were like it wasn't scary at all. Like you heard all these rumors about, oh, this is what they're doing to push back against ICE. It's awful, but honestly, like the way Portland like combated that is that they made it really weird. They you had frog costumes and dinosaur costumes and all these great ways of camaraderie, that were just funny and not, non-threatening. You had like naked bicycle rides. So I think that that was something that was very, that's been very powerful. And, now the frog is everywhere. Um, Chicago has really come out, especially because we've seen so many enforcement actions happening like near schools. Like the parents have come out, they have formed groups where they're at the schools during pickup and drop off and pickup. And they are sitting there, they're watching, they have whistles, they're like blowing their whistles if they see ICE. They're really making sure that people know when ICE is around and they're showing up to be witnesses, to be there and to protect their communities, and it's been working in schools. So that has been something really great to see. Now, of course, you can do a lot of education, and this just it says 287G, but it can be any issue, right? Education is like your number one key to really changing hearts and minds. A lot of what we hear, there's so much misinformation out there, right? And we also have this distancing and dehumanizing of immigrants so that then people are like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, I can't connect, oh, they're criminals, they're and all these things that you hear, and that's not the reality, right? The reality is something else altogether. Like my mom is an immigrant from Mexico, and when she became a US citizen, it was like the happiest day in her life. And because she told me that, that is what she said. And she had a photo with her little flag, and my mom's in a wheelchair because she has a disability, and she just looked so happy. Like it's still one of the best photos that I own, and like just seeing her there like radiating this joy. This is what it means to me, like when I think of like immigrants and being an immigrant, and people being so proud to get to that, and being able to be in this country and to call this country home. And I think that we lose a lot of that narrative and a lot of that insight with, you know, the way people message. So we really need to combat that. We need to do better at educating. We need to be posting one pagers. So if you have any thoughts on something you could write about, and it doesn't you don't have to be like the award-winning author. Like you just have to be someone with a story, someone with an opinion that's real, if that's really going to be evoking sentiments that are important, because that's what we want to see. We want to really get people engaged. And a lot of times people are like, oh, well, let me try to put it in the New York Times, things like that. No, put it in your local paper, because those are the hearts and minds we are trying to change. We're trying to change, like, your next door neighbor who might not be as pro-immigrant as you are. So write something, create videos that talk about, like, if you have an immigrant experience, if you're like, this is where my family comes from, this is where I came from, and I think it's something that's really important to do. And of course, legislation, really, really important this next year. Obviously, we're going to be very anti 287G, but you want to make sure that you're showing up, that you're giving testimony, that you're speaking to your representatives, but also reach out to your local law enforcement, right? Because here's the thing, here's the question that I ask. Like, I wonder, like, what would local law enforcement do if ICE shows up, right? And if they're using excessive force, like they have in so many circumstances, and you call the police, is your police going to come to your aid? Or, are you going to find yourself like having, your local police doing crowd control or something else for ICE? So it's something that's really important. And you just want to make sure that you know. And you also just want to know maybe if like, oh, are you thinking about signing on to 287G, or what are your thoughts? Like, how do you interact with immigrants? Just talk to people. Okay, y'all don't need to know that. So it's emergency preparedness. These are just some things, that you can help people be prepared, like what they should carry. We have, that's clinic, and again, I'll share all of this, but we have a rapid response toolkit. And so we have all of these. We have like a notebook where people can fill this out beforehand and they can have everything ready, so that they know who their emergency points of contact are. They know their like A number. They have like everything ready to go. So just to be on the safe side. And again, family plan, make a copy, A number. And it's really important to note that, in Maryland, there is standby guardianship, which is amazing. And this was created during the first Trump administration because of ICE detaining folks. And so basically it activates, like you can go to a judge and get it, uh, once somebody gets detained, and it's good for 6 months. And there's a whole project dedicated to this so people can get help, if they reach out to the standby guardianship project. So really, really urge y'all to do that, to get people to go there. And I put a little bit more about that. I think I am running out of time. So I just want to make sure that you all know that, certain actions, right? Like you're allowed to protest. There are protections, for protesting. But then, of course, there are things that you might do. Like you might be thinking, oh, well, I see ICE is like running down this immigrant. Like I want to help them. Please come here. You just signal, come, come. And then you hide them like let's say you have a bakery. You hide them in the back room of your bakery, right? And you should know that that is going to be seen as harboring, right? An obstruction. You could be hit with charges if you're found out. And of course, again, civil disobedience, whatever your morality, faith, calls you to do, but you should consult with an attorney if you're thinking that you want to engage on this side of things, because these are penalties, and criminal charges that will stick with you for a very long time. So it's definitely something that you just want to be aware of. Um, and a lot of these things depend on whether you knew about the person's immigration status. And so here's the thing, don't ask people their immigration status. The less you know, the better. Because if you don't know their status, you had no reason to, then the less likely that you'll be hit with a harboring charge or that it'll stick. So, yeah. And make sure there are good policies. Again, like I have some examples of policies of like schools and other places. This is a little bit about giving in-person testimony. And remember, it's not just about the legislative session, like next year at the state level. Like go to like your town hall meetings, to other places where you can show up and participate and speak. Just give your opinion. A lot of times, they don't always hear from us. And when they do, they get really excited. They're like, oh my gosh, a lot of people showed up. We're listening. This is clearly important. And this is something about like, and then I have stuff about accompaniment and how you can get involved and what it's about. And these are some things about best practices. Make sure you don't give legal advice. That's always like, no matter what, if you are not an attorney or an accredited representative, do not be giving legal advice. If they have an attorney, also make sure that you respect, that relationship and give them the privacy that they need. But, it just, whatever you do, you don't want to escalate a situation, right? If something happens, and it's awful that we have to be the ones responsible for de-escalation, but those are the times. And so you want to make sure that, if things are getting heated, like bring it down, like try to keep the immigrants safe, and make sure you are prioritizing their safety. Because while, like my privilege might keep me safe, the same cannot apply, will not apply to my immigrant friend or whoever is being targeted at that time. Okay. And these are the questions to ask if someone's being detained that you are with. Which detention center are they being sent to? Is deportation imminent? And if you can get the name and contact information of the ICE or court, like this is if you're in the court or the check-in, get the name of the officer, um, court officer, ICE officer, and you can also ask for their supervisors. I think that's always a good idea. And just help share information. Here's like the Know Your Rights for Immigrants, NACASEC, they're great. Human Rights First, Ready Now, also amazing. And these are things that you can then plug in your emergency contacts. So if you get detained, if an immigrant gets detained, they can just hit, what they need, and it immediately informs like their attorneys, their next of kin, whoever it is, that needs to pick up like their children, like everything gets activated. So it's really useful. So please do that. Don't forget CASA's raid tip hotline. Um, they've been great. It's a great way to reach out, let them know what's happening, what you're seeing. This is like information though about what you can report. And, we want to make sure that there's a lot of information you're including because sometimes people are like, I saw ice. Like I got a call, like in my neighborhood, like Viviana, I saw ice in your, like we heard that ice was in your neighborhood, like at the chicken place. And then I called the chicken place and they were like, no, it was an altercation between like two customers and it was the police that came. So you want to make sure that you are giving enough information so that you're not, creating more fear unnecessarily. Um, so yes, so details and recording the interaction, best practices. Again, you want to make sure, like if I'm recording, I'm going to hold this up. I'm going to say, I am asserting my First Amendment rights and recording this interaction. I am not interfering with their arrest, and I am standing several steps back at a safe distance. So those are best practices because once you do that, like a lot of times, sometimes they're like, oh, you're interfering, and you want to make sure you are not interfering with what is happening. And then I have some other things about what you can also get. And then always just keep people's privacy in mind, right? Because if you live stream publicly, you could be putting the migrant or other people who are around them at risk. So you just want to consider that. And then, of course, there's a lot of ways like prayer vigils we've seen. Yeah, but rule number one, consult an attorney. Um, and then we've seen a lot of scams. So I just have that. And then I have a whole bunch of different resources for you all so you can know where to go. So you can also, this one's to help you with any media engagement that you might do, some of the best practices, and that's it. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Viviana, again, and thank you for that amazing information for all of us to delve into and learn a little bit more about. And of course, we'll share information afterwards for everybody that might have questions. I know we did want to do some Q&A. Unfortunately, because of the way things are looking with time, I do want to move on to our portion with our legislators. Again, Viviana, thank you so much for this incredible information. But moving along with our programming, I do want to introduce the chair of the Latino Caucus, Delegate Martinez, to who will be here with us for a couple of questions, and to I guess share a little bit more about the work that we do. Delegate Martinez, just want to make sure that you can hear me. Oh, I think you might be muted.
There we go. Thanks, Jason. And thanks everyone for being on the call. I am Maryland State Delegate Ashanti Martinez. I serve as chair of the Maryland Legislative Latino Caucus, and we are really focused and dedicated on making sure that we are keeping our immigrant communities both protected and informed. So calls like today and some of the other opportunities we've had across the state to keep people just knowledgeable, because I think at this moment in particular, having information, having knowledge is really what's going to keep us and our community safe. I also am just really proud of the coalition of support that we have in the House. We have in the Senate, we have about 90 plus members of the General Assembly, many of which are called associate members for the caucus, because they understand that our immigrant communities deserve protection. They deserve champions that stand up for them in legislation. And so we've been able to be really successful working in coalition with so many among us in the legislature. This upcoming session, 287G prohibition is going to be top priority for us. We're so grateful to have Senate President Ferguson on board, making sure that we are keeping ICE out of collaboration with local law enforcement. I'm really proud of the work that has already been happening and the organizing that's been happening right there on the Eastern Shore. You guys are making your voices very loud and clear, and you have full support from the caucus in that. And I'll just end with this before we get to questions. I'm just really, really proud to lead this caucus in this moment, because I think Maryland in particular is really showing other folks how to lead during this time. And so if there are any questions, please, would love to answer.
And for anybody that has questions, I guess if you could raise your hand, and then from there we'll unmute you, because I do believe that everybody's in a situation where you can't unmute automatically. So if you could just raise your hand, then we can happily answer the questions that you may have. Or you can type in one chat as well if you don't feel comfortable having your voice out loud.
And oh, perfect. I think someone's already dropped something in the chat. Go ahead.
I do see one on chat regarding what are some student opportunities, some student job opportunities that exist within the MGA for students to get involved with the Latino Caucus. By Cindy. Yeah. So as of right now, that's the only question I'm seeing. Oh, never mind.
So there is a internship program through the General Assembly that you apply to. I know the Latino Caucus has been in interviews already with folks, but that does not mean that whether or not you can work for us directly, that you can still be involved. We would love for you to organize students on campus to write letters to the legislators around these particular bills and submit them virtually. You can also testify virtually. You don't have to come in person. You know, our committee rooms expand to wherever you have Zoom. And so making sure that you sign up, that you stay vigilant, whether it's, you know, committee actions or whether it's something that's happening on the floor, and then also making your voices heard online. All of my colleagues pretty much have social media, and if they're not checking it, their staffs are. And so making it very public and clear about where Marylanders are on the issues before us is, I think, your responsibility as a citizen, no matter how old you are. And so I think holding us accountable is a big role and responsibility for folks during this session.
Perfect. Then we have from Lee.
All right, Lee, you should be getting an update to unmute.
There we go. They should be able to.
Hey, Lee, you should be getting a
Unmuted. Okay, am I unmuted now?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, thank you so much for doing this today. I'm really glad that I'm a part of this. In Salisbury, I may be wrong, so I'd like to know if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like there is a central place for immigrants, and I hope I'm wrong, especially the Latino immigrants, where people get information. Like I have some friends who are, and I was wondering, maybe I'm wrong, so please tell me, but is there a place for them to get the Know Your Rights cards, and how are they distributed? And I just feel like there's a lot of fear. I'm part of a group here with Megan, and we started compiling a list of resources because we didn't know if there were like a central kind of place for people to find out information. We have a wonderful Haitian community center here, but I haven't really been able to figure out what to do for other groups. Can you let me know if there's a place that people should go, or if you have a list of resources for this area?
When you say resources, what in particular are you thinking?
Legal resources. So I'm kind of in a signal group, and I was able to find lawyers that help people in this area. But honestly, I had to go to individuals and find out. If immigrants are taken, there was somebody in our group who told us about, you were saying something, I think, Viviana, about what to do for your children, and there's a legal document, and I was sent that by somebody. What I'm wondering is there like a group or a central place to get all this information because I'm doing my own list right now. And I want to make sure I have plenty of stuff on that list. And if it's a waste and I shouldn't be doing this, then that's good to know. But I don't know where, like, if we know people who need help, especially Hispanic people, I think that's the problem. I don't know that they have as many resources here as our Haitian groups do, or other
Understood.
groups.
So if you have folks that you know individually that need assistance, please send their information to myself or the caucus. We were able to get a large sum of money in the budget for legal assistance, particularly for those that are facing immigration issues. And so there is money within the state budget for pro bono lawyers. So please definitely send them our way. In addition, there are a lot of informal channels. I don't know, I can't specifically talk about any that reached each
Yeah,
shore, but I do know that places like CASA, which is a large immigrant advocacy organization here, not only just in the Mid-Atlantic, but across the country, has connections, whether it's to the Haitian community, the Latino community. They're connected to immigrants across the state, and getting any information you need from them is also a great way to make sure you have your information correct. But we have compiled our own database of resources here at the caucus, and making sure that the community is informed is part of our role. So if there are things that you're looking for, don't
awesome.
ever hesitate to reach out to us, because we oftentimes, a contact or just a resource paper or something of that nature.
It's awesome. Okay, that's great. And so that would be, and maybe you can leave that information. I see it's a Latino caucus, and maybe Megan, you guys are going to give that to us. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, and Jason can put our contact information in the chat as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Martinez. And Lee, I'll also add that right here in Salisbury, we do have a CATA office that they do a lot of this hands-on work. So we have not really had a chance to engage them too regularly, just because they've been prioritizing like boots on the ground work and haven't been able to come out to a lot of the council meetings that I know your group's been extremely vocal at when it's been coming to challenging 287G. So I'll make sure that you also get connected here, because we do have resources. It is just an awareness thing, because I know that there are a lot of great people here across Maryland and the shore that do work. But as we all know, it's a very loud world we live in, especially on social media. So it's very easy for us to just lose track of those resources. So I'll make sure that not only do you get in contact with the caucus, but that you also get connected with CATA down here in Salisbury as well.
And I do see we do have another question. It says, are there any legislators from the Eastern Shore that are on our coalition?
So Delegate Cerise Sample Hughes is a member of the Latino Caucus.
And then we also have, is this budget for pro bono lawyers for any immigrant in Maryland, or do they have to live in a specific part of Maryland?
It is for anyone in the state of Maryland.
And then Lee, in case you didn't see it, there was some additional information dropped down below as well for finding legal help and support. And I do have a question, Delegate Martinez, if you don't mind. And again, anyone, if you have a question, and you're welcome to private message me or message in the chat. I just wanted to maybe get a sense of just maybe you as an individual, what is it that you are looking to prioritize? I know that there's some affordability is a really big topic that's happening coming into 2026, whether it be from housing to energy affordability. And this really impacts especially us here on the shore. And I was just curious, what is it that you were looking to prioritize coming into this legislative session?
Absolutely. So I do this work for working people. I am a working person. My community that I represent, that I grew up in, I now get to represent. And so for me, affordability is always top of mind, whether you're talking about energy costs or housing. But healthcare affordability is where a lot of my sweat equity is going to be spent, particularly because of the big ugly bill that was passed over the summer by this Republican Congress. They're cutting a lot of health equity programs, a lot of cost sharing with Medicaid. There's a lot of work requirements added that are going to make a lot of individuals lose coverage, because you're going to have to renew every 6 months. And we've got to build out the infrastructure to support that. So I've been working closely through my committee, the Health and Government Operations Committee, and Delegate Jocelyn Pena-Melanik, on making sure that Maryland Health Connections has the resources necessary, whether that's to build an app, to build out their website, to build the staffing, but also working with folks at the Department of Social Services, because SNAP is about to be benefits are about to be impacted as well. And so we understand that when we look at health, we've got to look at whole body health. That's understanding the nutrition aspects and how those are going to impact people in our lives, but then also healthcare. A lot of the programs and extensions for Medicaid waivers are going to now go away, and that's going to impact our immigrant neighbors a lot. We just passed a lot of bills, whether it was healthy babies or some of the bills around just allowing individuals access to care, allowing individuals to purchase within our health exchange. Those limitations are going to be away, and now people are going to have to fill the emergency room if they want care. Charity care, I think, is going to go really high in the state. And so figuring out how we have the resources for that, unlike the federal government, we cannot run at a deficit. We have to use what's in our means. And so when that is the case, and we already are facing a large deficit to kind of right size our ship, we've got to make tough choices. And so my focus is really making sure that we have the least impact among folks when it comes to healthcare.
Thank you for that, Delegate Martinez. And I will just add that Shore Progress, whatever you all need. We're getting and gearing up for our legislative session. Our legislative committee has usually been very involved when it comes to advocating for those needs. So please, if at any point you all need some additional Shore voices to help people understand that this is something that more residents across the state want to see, just know that you guys have support down here.
That's appreciated. And I know, Jason, I don't know if he's mentioned it, but, every week during the session, we meet with stakeholders and advocates, and we would love for you all to be a part of that conversation.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Read my mind. Thank you, Delegate.
Do we have any other questions, everyone? Please feel free in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and we can unmute you. Oh, Sam has a good question right here. How do we protect immigrants from predatory labor brokers?
That's a great question. One of the things that we have to do, and this is more of a federal conversation, this is why I was so adamant. I actually advocated on the Hill for this as soon as I became chair, was an extension of humanitarian parole. We've got to provide, if we're not going to provide folks with a pathway to citizenship because of the politics, we've got to provide people a pathway to work. And so humanitarian parole, TPS, some of these other protective statuses allow individuals access to work permits. And so one of the things that this current administration has been hell-bent on doing is creating chaos and confusion when it comes to this jigsaw puzzle of immigration, right? Depending on when you came, why you came, where you came from, you have a different status. We've got to figure out a way to work with our federal partners to streamline a protective status or parole for individuals so that we can get them safe work permits so that they don't have to go through these underground channels for work. Because ultimately, we all just want to feed our families. We all want safe communities. We all want kids to go to great schools and provide just opportunities for the next generation. Unfortunately, our immigrant communities have been brought here a lot of times for opportunity and labor. I tell folks all the time, most immigrants are here to provide comfort and commerce for the rest of us. We've got to figure out a way where we can right-size the ship, because this administration is really hell-bent on making it very difficult for folks to be here.
And then Sam followed up with a really good point. From my reading, 93% of Republicans support legal work permits. So I don't really understand who the performative cruelty is for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a topic that I think resonates with us really heavily here on the shore. A lot of our biggest industries are upheld by the immigrant community. Without their support and aid and their workforce, our economy is not going to be where it has been. I live just a couple miles down the road from Purdue, and the largest workforce base for the Purdue community are immigrants. And so just something for everyone to think about when we just had our Eastern Shore legislative pre-session conversation with our delegation, and I was really excited to hear Delegate Cherie Sample Hughes speak up very loud for our immigrant communities when we had another delegate on the panel who really, just to Sam Harvey's point, there's cruelty in what they want to see come from these attacks on these communities there, and it's just disappointing to see for my own delegation.
Something that I do want to just interject for this question, because I think it's a great, really important question, is that, there are so many other places that you can contact. Like if you see something, if you know about something, if you think it might be trafficking, you can contact the National Human Trafficking Hotline. If you're seeing some issues a lot of times we see like withholding of wages, so wage theft, or, you can file a complaint, right, with the Department of Wage and Hour Division, with our AG. I think that I think that it's really important to flag this, and also these labor violations can also make someone eligible for what we call a U visa, which is when someone has been a victim of a certain qualifying crime. And so there are several employment-based, like crimes that then can make them eligible. So it's really important if you hear about them to just be like, you have to talk to an immigration attorney because they really need to see if they qualify.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We have our goal, and I think Lee touched on this, is just to get as much of a better understanding of the aid and resource landscape that exists in the state and beyond as possible. We've been having some heartbreaking conversations here on the shore. One of our members recently connected with an individual whose brother was picked up by ICE in a very cruel and brutal way. He should have been receiving medical aid. He was denied medical aid. And because of that, this individual then felt fearful of going to continue to work. It means he's no longer getting the income to support his family. And not only that, he's fearful of going to the pantries because he's worried that now that there's an opportunity for, ICE to weaponize those who are seeking out additional care. And they've even pulled their children out of school for fear that their children are going to get picked up, because we've now had multiple instances where ICE has been seen out and about around our schools as well. So it's a bigger issue than I think people realize, because now what is also happening is we're seeing some of our most vulnerable communities become even more vulnerable. They're less likely to report crimes. They're less likely to report assaults. And in my opinion, the true bad faith actors go unchecked because these individuals now are in these positions of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
So, and does anyone have any questions? I apologize, I monopolized that for a second.
I will say as a little bit of a side note on the question of uh I guess protecting immigrants from predatory labor brokers. I do want to I do believe that Delegate Teresa Warman, the last legislative session, put out a bill like revolving around that. I'm trying to find the exact number to quote it, but I do believe there was a bill trying to address some of this for certain kinds of workers. Unfortunately, I do believe it did die in the Senate, but there is still work being done by caucus members on the topic.
Fantastic. And then I will say, as you all, I know it's still very early on, are building out your legislative priorities for the upcoming session, please feel free to share those with us. I feel that a lot of your legislative priorities are going to be those that we are prioritizing here on the shore, and we are all about building stronger coalitions across the state. So please let us know however we can do to help.
Absolutely.
And I think unless anyone has any additional questions, we can hop over to the last slide, which, give me one second, everyone.
That's
So,
I'd say we're all good. I do want to. Oh, Dr. Martinez
there we
saw
go.
you raise his hand.
Thank you. I just wanted to, before I hopped off, because there's a lot going on in the House of Delegates, if you know, so I do have some things I need to attend to, but I do want to just thank everyone for their commitment to this community. The Eastern Shore is becoming a special place for me. My parents purchased a home in Cambridge and they plan to retire there. And so I've gotten to spend some summer time there and have kind of understood why they fell in love with the city and their home. And so I'm just really looking forward to building more stronger relationships with you all in the caucus, and know that we are here for each and every one of you. There's never a moment where you cannot contact or reach us, because we really do fight for all of Maryland. Even though you might not have a delegate, that represents you, know that you do have delegates that are thinking about you, that love you, that care about you and your neighborhoods and your communities and your families. And that one delegate, if any, is me. And so I just want to make sure that you guys know we are always thinking of the shore when we think about what we're going to do for Maryland. So I just appreciate you guys for being here. I'm going to hop back on the phone, but definitely don't hesitate to continue to connect with the caucus. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Delegate. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
I really appreciate it. And then I'm just going to drop a link, everyone. So we've been talking about a lot of the work that the caucus has accomplished. And we've discussed, a lot of resource and opportunities, and I will follow up with you all with all the resources that you just heard us discuss here today. I think we all can agree that, this is an all hands on deck type of conversation, and we want to make sure you all get access to resources to help advocate for friends, families, neighbors, even strangers. That's the whole purpose of this. So, Jason, Viviana, if there were any like final questions or statements you all wanted to make.
I'll give it to Viviana first, if you'd like.
Thank you. And thank you both. This has been great. I did drop a link to some of the resources that we have, even though I'm going to share the slides and everything. But just in case you need an immediate fix, we are constantly updating our resources. So please feel free to use them. We have them translated, like our Know Your Rights information. We have them for like every possible scenario, like at an airport, if you're being detained, if you're in, criminal jail, like all the things that people should know. Here's my email. And I will say that, so technically I am in Prince George's County, but I've gone over to the Eastern Shore multiple times this year. One was for fun, but like the other other times was to like educate. Like we did a presentation at the University of Salisbury, and to the point of the one person who asked the question, am I wasting my time putting these resources together? I mean, I do think that there are a lot of groups that have these resources, but in terms of the Eastern Shore, it is limited. Like this is not the same as being in Prince George's or Baltimore City, where you have like 1,000,005 people. You have a lot of organizations that are doing this, so it is a little more piecemeal. But we really do want to support. We really want to be there. We want to make sure that we are giving everyone the resources and empowering you all to be able to support our immigrant populations and whatever you need from me to make that happen. Like, please, like this is, part of my job and I take it very seriously. It's really important. And so don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much. Jason, do you have anything you want to say?
Perfect. No, I appreciate it again, Viviana, for all her amazing work, and again to Short Progress for you guys making this possible. Again, as the delegate said, we're very much committed to continuing to support and be a voice for the community here. On a point that Viviana touched around testifying, I do want to stress that very, very much, especially for this upcoming session. Again, as always, for those of you that may not know, I love to share this, but at the MGA, now more than ever, it's super accessible to testify. If driving or again commuting to Annapolis seems undoable, there's now virtual options to testify if you would like to. If of course, if just like any other person, you have a job and maybe a committee meeting at 10 in the morning may not be doable for you, you can also submit written testimony. Again, anybody can do this as long as they make an MJA account. So I always encourage everybody to also participate that way. Again, having those voices there always means a lot to the legislators to make sure that the work that's being done is actually being visualized and being recognized, and always to make sure that the right thing is being done. So again, always appreciate everybody. I've left our email in the chat as well. For anybody that wants to save that, you can email us at any time of the day and we can share resources around databases that we may have, other, what do you call it, resources around like the bono lawyers fund that exists at the state level. Again, we can help you get connected with all those things. Just send us an email and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. But again, as always, thank you all for being here so much.
Thank you so much. And I will say, everyone, I've been copying and pasting everything that they've been sending in the chat. So I will follow up with the email if you didn't get it. So you also have access to all this content. And to Jason's point, part of Shore Progress is connecting Shore voices to what's going on in Annapolis. There's a lot of great things happening at the state level. And for many years, we've been really disengaged. I know geographically, that just makes it a little trickier for us, especially some of our lower shore communities, to get connected with what's going on in Annapolis. And our goal is to make you all more educated on what's going on, to engage you more regularly with these amazing leaders like we just had with Delegate Martinez. And we do a legislative committee. So we'll be following up with the Latino Caucus to learn more about their legislative priorities. We're already actually scheduling an update with the Women's Caucus as well. Our goal is to connect with every caucus that we can can here in Maryland to learn about their priorities, see where we can lend support, because they're going to need our voice. It helps to have us at the table as well. So if you're interested, I dropped a Google form for you all to fill out if you're interested. And I, again, like I mentioned, I will be following up with an email with all this content and with the contact information for everyone. And I just want to thank you both again for joining us. We really appreciate the time. I know on a Saturday evening, this may not have been your first choice. So thank you both so much for the time.
Of course, happy to.
Thank you all again.
all.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Well, that is a wrap on tonight. And thank you all for coming out.
Alrighty. Take care, everybody. Have a great day and enjoy your weekend.